Hello, crafty friends! It's Alicia here with a project for Tailored Expressions. You've probably heard of a room with a view, but have you heard of cards with a view? I'm here today to show you how to make a pair of cards with a window to the world. Featured on today's cards is the Arch Dreamscapes stamp set, and I'll be coloring those images in with the Dreamscapes layering stencil set. To create my windows, I'm using the Arch Interactive Window Die, the Arch Windowpanes Die Set, and additional Arch Nouveau dies. For my sentiments, I am using the Mix and Match for Him stamp set and the Modern Sentiment Labels Backer die set. I will also be using the Stitched Rectangle Stacklets die set, Up Against the Wall Split Background stamp, and the Shiplap Background stamp to create scenes and layers. For inks, I got out Gumball, Blue Corn, Green Tea, Brussels Sprout, Sweet Corn, Honey, Sea Salt, and Oyster. For cardstocks, I got out Sugar Cube, Sea Salt, Oyster, Blue Corn, and Brussels Sprout. I will also be using a piece of TE Window Acetate. For stamping, I got out the exclusive TE Teal Misty and Just Press tool, and I will be ink blending with some bitty blender brushes. I will be embellishing with some silver matte enamel dots and using a variety of adhesives to hold everything together. Let's get crafty! To get started, I'm going to stamp two of the scenes from the Arch Dreamscape stamp set onto a couple scraps of sugar cube with oyster ink. I'm going to set one stamp up on each square, and because I will be ink blending over it later and kind of covering up some of the color, I will be inking up and stamping these twice. I want each of my windows to look like they are on the wall of a building, so I'm going to create a couple backgrounds. For this first one, I have a piece of oyster cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to stamp the shiplap background onto it with oyster ink for kind of a tone-on-tone look. You saw there that my cardstock is being held in place with a little bit of tape runner, and then I place my background stamp face down on top of that, trying to get it centered around where the cardstock was. Then I can just pick that up with the door of my MISTI, ink it up, and get it stamped. For the second card, I wanted to do a horizontal layout, so the Up Against the Wall split background stamp is perfect for this. You can do horizontal or vertical, and the neat thing is you can separate the wainscoting from the wallpaper on the top. For this, I'm using sea salt cardstock, and for the bottom portion, I'm using sea salt ink. Kind of the same ideas with the last one for a tone-on-tone look, but this one is very subtle. Once I had that bottom portion stamped, I made sure to leave my stamp right in place where it was, and now I'm going to bring in the top half or the wallpaper and line that up with the bottom portion before removing it. This way it ensures it's going to be exactly where I need it. I inked up my wallpaper with Brussels sprout ink and then used the Just Press tool to help me get a nice crisp impression. To color in your dreamscapes, you could use whichever medium you prefer, markers, watercolors. For me, I will be using the layering stencil set. I temporarily tacked down my first scene to a grid paper placemat and got stencil number 1 set up. Because the lines are already stamped, that definitely helps with alignment. For this first layer, I'm using sweet corn ink and my yellow bitty blender. Now, if you have regular size blending brushes, those will work too. Just because there are some tight spots on this, I chose the smaller ones. If you do use larger ones, you might need to cover up some areas with Post-it tape, which you will see me do later. After that first layer of color was down, I brought in stencil number 2, and for this one I'm using Honey and Gumball inks. I will be using my same yellow bitty blender for the honey. I did clean it off on a paper towel off to the side. When you go from a lighter color to the darker color, it's not as important, but I just try to get in the habit of cleaning my brushes between each color so I don't contaminate an ink pad. I added some gumball to the bottom for lighter color water and then brought in stencil number 3, and this one will color in some of the mountains, and for this I'm using green tea ink. Again, I start with the lighter green that I'm using for this stencil. And finally for this image, I brought in stencil number 4, and I will be using Brussels sprout and blue corn inks. Now because some of these areas are closer together, I want to make sure I don't get any green in my water. I did cover up that bottom area with a piece of post-it removable labeling tape, the same thing that I've been holding the stencils in place with. After I ink blended the green ink, I moved the piece of labeling tape to the top to cover up the mountains, and I finished this stencil with the blue corn ink. Now you did notice there that I brought in a little piece of paper towel, and I did wipe away excess green ink just so I didn't accidentally pick it up with my blending brush. And here's a look at that finished image. I cleaned and dried the stencils and then used the same process for the second Dreamscapes image. On stencil number 1, I used sweet corn and green tea. On stencil number 2, I inked that one up with the honey. Stencil number 3 used the gumball ink for some light water. And then finally on stencil number 4, I used blue corn. And here's a look at that finished image. To cut these down, I used the smallest die from the additional Arch Nouveau die set, and then I want to make these a little fun, a little interactive, a little more realistic looking, so I got out the Arch Interactive Window die and the Arch Windowpanes Die Set. For the first window, the mountain scene, I got out a scrap of blue corn cardstock. Once again, I'm going to use the smallest die from the additional Arch Nouveau set along with the interactive window. This cuts a fun set of shutters in there, but before I fold those back, I want to go ahead and get this added to my scene. To do this, I flipped my shutters upside down and put a thin line of glue around the outside edge. Now when you add your glue, you want to make sure that you don't get too much or get it over underneath the shutters because you don't want to glue those shut. Ask me how I know. For my second image, I will be using one of the dies from the Arch Windowpanes die set and cutting it 4 times out of a piece of Brussels sprout cardstock. Now I want this window to look a little more realistic, so I brought in a piece of TE Window Acetate, and using the smallest die from the additional Arch Nouveau's die set, I cut one of those out. To start building this window, I flipped one of the window panes upside down, and just like with the shutter, I added a small line of glue around the outside edge and then at the cross in the middle. Again, you'll want to keep this nice and thin because when you go to put the acetate on the back, you don't want it to like squeeze out so that it mars up or gunks up your acetate. While that was drying, I put together the rest of the window. I started by adhering together the other 3 layers of the window pane, and using liquid glue really helps with this because you have some wiggle time to get everything aligned just right. Once those 3 layers were together, I flipped it upside down, added another line of glue, and then added my scene to the back of this. You'll see here that those layers add a little more dimension so that when I go to put the window with the window pane on the front, there's some separation between the pane of glass and the scene itself. Just makes it look a little more realistic. Here's a look at my windows all dry. I use the scoring lines on the shutters to help open those up, and I just love the shine that the acetate gives to the window pane. While I was off camera waiting for those to dry, I used the largest die from the additional Arch Nouveau die set, and I cut a backer for each window. For my shuttered window, I used oyster cardstock, and for my sunrise scene, I used sea salt. These are the same colors that I use for stamping the backgrounds, and I thought this would just help it stand out a little bit from that stamping. Next, I used the largest die from the Stitched Rectangle Stacklets die set, and I cut down each of my backgrounds. While I was off camera working on that, I also got my sentiments ready using the Mix and Match for Him stamp set with the Modern Sentiment Labels backer. With all of the parts ready, I assembled my cards and embellished one of them with the silver matte enamel dots, and here are some close-up looks at the finished cards. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's video. If you enjoyed the process, a thumbs up is appreciated. And if you're not already a subscriber, we do hope you'll click on the button below so you're the first to know about our latest videos. To find out more about the products I used today, you can check out the links in the description box below or visit the Tailored Expressions online store at tailoredexpressions.com.